Sometimes I think the best way to get people to pay attention to a game is to lean hard into the absurd, so that when they walk into a game store or pass your booth at a convention, what is that? They pick up your box and look at it. The always difficult step 1. A lederhosen wearing block of cheese? Making like Julie Andrews on the top of a mountain? What is this? And then step 2. They look at the back of the box to find out what's going on. These are difficult steps for people to take. Lots of times people just pass by and they'll never even look closer at something because they're like, yeah, I've seen this before. Move on. That is not the case here with Cubitos. I look further, it's a dice-based racing game. There's lots of different dice going on. There's all sorts of things. There's blocks everywhere. I get some sense of maybe why this block of cheese is a star in the game. And so I look further into how it's played, which I will show you now. Here are the components for Cubitos, with the game including 2 double-sided game boards that show different racetrack configurations. Your goal in the game is to be the first player to reach the finish line. If you're the only player to do so in a round, then you win. If multiple people do, then you keep moving from the start line with whatever extra movement you have remaining, and if people tie, you keep having rounds until one player is ahead of everyone else, and they win the game. Each player has a figure on the racetrack. You have a figure in the fan track as well. We'll talk about that later. You are going to move on the track by rolling these dice. However, you start with 7 light gray dice and 2 dark gray, and only the dark gray have a foot, which is what you need in order to move on the track. The light gray dice have only a coin symbol, which is also in the dark gray. So you can't move much with what you have here, but you can use the coins to buy new dice in these 8 colors that are available in the pool. And they will give you different powers depending on whatever cards are in play. There are 8 cards of each power, and all the green cards are sort of similar, and all the red cards are sort of similar. But you have variety in what's available to you, and the rulebook has different suggested layouts for card combinations and boards. So we'll start with this layout. The starting player for a round has this bonus die. You will roll that die along with 9 dice, which is everything you have to start with. And you move any hits that you have to the active area, hits being face-up dice. I have 2 dice in the active area. I roll again. I move this over, and now when you have 3 or more dice in the active area, you have a choice of what you want to do. If I roll again and get all blanks, then I have busted. If I roll and get something, then I'm still good. So now I can roll again and bust, or I can go with what I have here. Let's try one more time. Oh, I got 1 hit. Okay. Let's stop there. All right, now I have 6 temporary money. All the round coins are temporary. Any chits you get here are permanent money that you can save and carry over, and you can build up so that you can afford these more expensive dice. But all I have right now is 6 money. You can buy at most 2 dice, with those dice being different colors. So let's say I buy 2 for a brown die and 4 for the green. I place them in the discard pool. Everything I use goes in the discard pool. This starting die goes to the next player for the next round, and everything that's blank stays here in the roll area. So next turn, I already have 5 dice here that I'm going to roll. I'd pick more from my draw pool, but it's empty. So I slide everything from discard to draw, and then I pick 4 dice. So now I have 9 to roll for the next turn. So roll for my turn. I have a shield. So the shield, well, it gives you a power. If you were about to bust, you then use this die, that is, put it in the discard area, then you roll all your gray dice everywhere. And then you don't bust. Okay, so there's no risk to pushing right now. And now I got 3 money. And still no risk. Wow, look at all this. Still no risk. Still no risk. Well, now there is a risk, because of course, if I bust, then this goes over here, and I must re-roll all of my gray dice, which means I'll lose all the money that I have here. So I'll stop. with 3, 6, 9 money, I can get a cheese and put that over here. Okay, so I've got no movement on the board right now. Probably the other player has done something, but I've added 3 dice to my pool. Everything that I use goes to the discard area. Again, refill up to 9. And so ideally you're going to be using all the good stuff that you buy, because the light gray dice are terrible, but of course it depends on the setup here. This gives you a way to actually make use of those light gray dice. Okay. This one, if you have Fast Cat, then you get to select 2 dice from your zone and then move them to your active zone. Move them to your active zone. Here with the blue one, you get to roll all your gray and white dice. So everything. So different dice work different ways. The purple one here gives you movement for every white and gray dice that is active. So that's cool. There's all sorts of different combinations that you can come up with depending on the cards available, and then also using the symbols on the track. So this space here, when you land on it at the end of your movement, assuming I ever got any feet, of course, like the cheese can give me 3 movement if I end up with a cheese symbol in the active area. If you end on this space here that says lose a die, you could take any die here and you throw it out of the game. So you can get rid of these less valuable, less useful dice. If you land on the jetpack, then all your remaining movement is doubled for the rest of that turn. For this shortcut here, if I'm on this space and I can spend 8 money, I jump over here, which is easier than moving. There are some spaces that let you gain a die, sometimes with a cost limit. So here, gain a die that cost at most 4. This is gain any die on the board, so it can help you push towards the end. There are other sorts of shortcuts. There are the flags here that will give you fans. When you get a fan, you move along the track and you get the reward. So here I get 1 credit that I can save to spend at whatever time I want. When I go to this space, I get a credit and I get a hand. I've increased my number of fans. So now when I choose dice at the start of a round, I have 10 dice, with the start die not counting towards that total. And as I continue along the fan track, now I can continue to have more and more dice. And sometimes the fans matter because you will have cards that reference the fans, giving you money or movement equal to whatever your fan is or some percentage of your fan base. There's lots of combinations that come into play, but the focus of what you're doing, roll the dice, decide when you want to stop. If you bust, if I had this over here in my active area and I roll and I get nothing, I bust. I lose everything that I have here, and as compensation, I get a fan. That's it. So I get 3 permanent money, but I was going to have a lot more than that if I got to keep everything here. So you have a choice often over whether you are going to bust or not, or sorry, whether you're going to push yourself and try to get more things. Small point, of course, I did have the shield, so I'd move the shield over there, and I would roll all my gray dice. Oh, not this one. That is not gray. And I get this, and now I can bust again, but I have much less than I had before. So you have choices over what you want to buy, how often you want to roll, where you want to move, what bonuses you want to get on the track as you are trying to beat the opponent there. One other note about the track, you'll notice these red lines. If you are behind the leader by a red line, then your roll number, the number of dice you roll for that turn, is increased by 1. So at this point, if I had this fan base here, I could roll 10 dice plus 1 for being 1 line behind the leader. I'd roll 11 dice total, which helps you catch up. If he had moved here, now I'm 2 red lines, so I'd roll 12 dice total. Okay, good. I have not used this card here. This card helps when you're playing, sort of, kinda. We sort of used it in our games, where you keep this face up. It shows you what you're doing on the roll turn. You were drawing your dice, you were rolling your dice, you're possibly pushing, and you move dice to the active zone. And then once you pass, you go to the run phase, and it's telling you how to do things in which order. Some dice give you a power, a now power that takes effect as soon as you have that. Some give you a run power that works during this run phase after you've stopped rolling, and some have an active power that works as long as it's face up in your active zone. Some dice as well have little dots, like this cheese one here has one side with dots and one side without dots. And sometimes you will get a separate ability depending on whether you have the dotted side or not. For example, the dog die has one plain dog face and one dog face with 4 dots around it. And in this case, if you got the 4 dots, you get a movement, but then you lose the die, in addition to getting the 5 money that you would normally get for this. So it's like, I guess it's good to get that 1 extra movement, but then I lose the die and my 8 money investment is gone. What do you want to risk? What are you trying to get here? How do you put everything together in the right combination to beat the opponent? There's not necessarily a right answer, but sometimes it sure seems like it is, just when you watch the success that someone has with the choices they've made compared to what you've done. And there's a relatively quick overview of Cubitos, which I've now played 6 times on a review copy from AEG with 2 and 3 players. It does not give you every detail of play, and there are a lot of details you could potentially talk about, such as the nature of each game board, which they all have their particular quirks, such as this one, which has a very windy path upon which you are racing, because normally you cannot enter water spaces. However, a number of the blue cards give you a power that, when it's active, allow you to enter a water space, which is great. Except if you don't finish getting out of the water on your turn, you're stuck in the middle somewhere and your movement stops. Well, next turn you will need another blue power to keep moving. So once you start moving in the water, you can continue moving. And if you're next to land, well, then you can just move and hop onto land and keep going. The rules are somewhat good about covering all these details here. There are a lot of different rule questions asked on Board Game Geek and answered. There's just a lot of detail going on because you have so many things to consider, so many details of how everything interacts. This board has 2 huge shortcut spaces, one that costs money, one that costs feet, and the boards invite you to play a lot of different ways depending on what you're interested in doing. So we have this space up here that allows you to get 2 fans and it allows you to lose 2 dice. So if you want, you can hang out here a lot and try to hop back and forth from one to the other, getting fans and building up lots of permanent money, building up your hand size so that you're rolling more dice on a turn, and also losing dice so that you get rid of all the junky light gray ones and replace them with something better. Although, of course, you hardly need a huge hand size if you're dumping all your terrible dice. You can build up a lot here, try to save the money, and then get 8 and jump down here. And hopefully, the other players haven't just gone ahead by doing things along the way. It's a balance here where you're paying attention somewhat to what other players are doing, but at the same time, you are completely independent from those other players. What they do almost never affects you, and you often just don't even pay attention to what they're doing because it doesn't matter. You have your own thing that you're trying to do with the different board and then with the combination of cards as well. Each color has 7 different cards, not 8. Refresh the rules between the last segment and this one. And you're looking at them and you're trying to see how things will combine together. And sometimes it's very straightforward, such as the example I was showing you where the purple card references white and gray dice. So you want to get white and gray dice if you're going to be using the purple, but the purple has a huge cost and who knows whether you're going to be able to afford it. You're going to have to work towards that. Or you can muddle along and just take things as they come. I've got 4 money this turn. What do I want to get? And work that way, or you can work a little more consciously and try to have a plan for what you're doing, but you're also up to the luck of the dice. So you've got all these different elements that you're kind of piecing together. What are you trying to get on the track? What benefit? Do you want to just move ahead? Do you want to bounce around and get the bonuses? Or are you going to go on this long path off to the side where you get a permanent 7 money and try to hit that multiple times and you can buy those super expensive dice that could help you a lot or that may end up doing nothing? Because aside from the card power and the map power, you also have just the rolling of the dice themselves. How far do you want to push what you are getting on a turn? Because as soon as you have 3 or more dice in the active area, you risk busting if you get nothing, unless you have the green dice that will often help save you in some manner. So there's lots of possibilities for how things combine together, but as I mentioned, often it feels like you're just doing all this on your own, and you don't pay attention to what the other players are doing. This has been kind of my experience over these 6 games, again with 2 and 3 players, in that we're moving on the path, but I'm not necessarily paying attention to you. I'm not worrying, like if I get extra dice because you're ahead of me, that's just a bonus for me. I'm not planning for it. And if I'm moving ahead because I've got good movement, I'm not worrying too much that I'm giving you extra dice. It's just like, it's just a consequence. But I'm going to move on to whatever I'm trying to do. But it's not playing off of you necessarily. We've had only, I think, 1 instance in which we ran out of the supply of a dice. There are rules for playing non-simultaneously if you want, where you can take turns rolling the dice, with you starting with whoever has the most dice in their pool, or sorry, who will be rolling the most dice on a turn, going clockwise from the starting player if there's a tie. There's also a method for during the run phase, you go in order from the starting player. I'm not quite sure why those 2 are different. It just seems a little arbitrary, but there you go. You can play not simultaneously, but generally it doesn't matter. You're just doing your thing. And the game feels somewhat solitaire because, to a large degree, it's just like this. I'm rolling my dice, I roll my dice, I roll my dice. I'm not even looking at you. I don't care. Except if you have the red dice, which are the things that do matter, because you need more active red symbols than any other player in order to use the red power. So until someone buys a red die, and I also have a red die, you're not really paying attention to them. If you're running short on a die in a pool, maybe you'll pay attention because you're buying them in player order. But otherwise, you're just doing your thing. And it feels like you're racing in a cloud almost, because it's like the other player isn't even there. The only time it really makes a difference is when someone is close to the finish line, and it now matters how you're rolling the dice. If you are close to winning and you're going first because you have more dice, I want to see whether you actually get there. You're going to have to roll, and then you'll end your turn, and now I know what I have to beat. Or if I'm in the lead and you have more dice, you have to account for what I might possibly do. Eric needs only 3 feet to win. Can he do that? Is it going to happen? But I have to roll first because I got more dice. There's all these things going on, but it's the last turn that we're really now paying attention to one another. And so the game has this great puzzle feel to it, where you're trying to put everything together the right way, where you are trying to overcome the odds of what you're going to be getting on a turn. Because, pick up the cards here. Because the cards have 1 to 3 active faces depending on what color it is, right? The purple has only 1 active face. The white has 3. The yellow has 2. And so on. So you're trying to judge the probability of you busting based on what you're rolling on each turn. But again, that's this solitaire thing. You're trying to buy the dice that are going to work with what you have, choosing the right dice to put into your roll pool for the turn. It's a solitaire activity. It's all this solitaire puzzling that's going on, and then it matters only at the end of the game when I'm looking to see whether I need to race ahead or not. Do I have a chance to catch up to someone? Because I think I've lost every time I played. One player is really good at putting together combinations, and John was just running away with the game lots of times, just putting things together, everything right, and you can't do anything necessarily to stop him because, again, aside from the red die, all the dice don't even don't do anything to other people. They're not affecting you in any way. I can't adjust your fan base. I can't change things except possibly a red power, which may let me add dice to your pool or affect you somehow. Feels like I'm alone, which is the opposite of a race. It's a race in a very abstract manner. So it's satisfying in one way because you're trying to put things together and overcome the odds, except it's more like I'm facing myself or challenging myself more than I am challenging other players. Or we're sort of running in parallel on different tracks, like we're ghosts that are then overlaid at the end, and we see who performs better. We just stop the race at a certain point. It's a very weird feeling. So Cubitos has been compared a lot to Quacks of Quacksalver, and it's understandable. Why? Because both games have a very similar feel. Quacks is a game in which each player has their own bag in which you're going to be putting tokens, and on a turn you are going to draw a token one by one, and at a certain point you risk overflowing your pot that you're building with the potion you're brewing as you're pulling things out of the bag, and so you decide to stop or not. And you can buy tokens to throw in your bag, and all the tokens have different powers, and there's a catch-up mechanism if you're behind the leader. There's all sorts of things that are very similar, and it's funny that Quacks came out in 2018, and of course Cubitos may have been in the works at that time. I have no way to know, but the games feel like they're brother or sister, they're sibling games, and yet somehow Quacks feels like there is more interactivity, even though there's not. It's a very weird mix, just because they feel the same, and yet Quacks has a little bit more of playing together, mostly because you are drawing independently of other players, and yet often you will play that you draw from your bag, and then we put our hands in the middle and reveal, and we reveal at the same time. And if I want to stop drawing, I just reveal an empty hand showing I'm done, I put my bag down, I'm finished. Otherwise I reveal my token. And so you have this collective feeling of pushing or not. You're looking at other people and you're not sure what they're going to do, and it feels like you're a bit more connected, even though otherwise you're just as independent as in Cubitos. So it's very interesting just to see the two games feeling very similar. Quacks is different in that it lasts 9 rounds. At the end of 9 rounds, whoever has the most points wins. There's no race element to that, except just a race for points to have more points than each other player with a fixed timeline for what you're doing, for how you're building. Things will stop at the end of 9 rounds no matter what, whereas in Cubitos, things can vary a bit depending on how much people want to jump back and forth, getting fans, losing dice, buying dice, hitting the money spaces and so on, possibly building up to try to get a shortcut. The game has more variability in that regard because the games play out differently depending on what people are trying to do. Again, similar but different. It's kind of a thing too. If you like rolling dice, you will have a chance to roll tons of dice in Cubitos. That can be a good thing. And again, you are leaning hard into the block system. I did not mention this yet, but the game includes these storage elements here. Ones for each color of die. You see I have not used most of them, or any of them really. So you fold it up and you can put the dice on top, and I understand why AEG includes this, because of course if you have up to 4 people rolling dice on a table, you want to ensure that any orange dice rolled on the table, well, I know they belong to someone, they were not part of the supply. So we have this thing here that we can put on the table and keep all the dice out of play on top. You can also see the faces more easily. You don't have to reference the cards. You know what's there. When the game is over, you can open the box, throw it through the air like that, store the dice inside, and they'll be there. And this just goes in the box now. And when you set up in the future, you just pull out the boxes and open it again and do all this. But I like the idea and concept. It again embraces the cubic nature of the game where we're really going for it. But I have a much simpler system for how I set up and play and put things away. Here we are at the end of a game of Cubitos. John has won again, of course. So to put things away, I'm going to take the cards that we used. I put them on top. I will put those cards into a sleeve. Cards are the only thing I sort of worry about as I'm packing a game, because you don't want to reveal information. All of these cards are not shuffled and dealt, so it's not really a big deal. And then I'm going to open the box, and I just sweep everything inside. Look at that. Storage. In just a few minutes, everything goes inside. Boards, this, that. Rules on top. Done. It's over. When it's time to play, open this. We'll choose what board we want to use. I'll show you the other side of the game board we didn't use before. Each player is going to get their board, put the fan track out. We'll end up choosing cards. Ready? There we go. Take your dice out. Ready to roll. You are, of course, welcome to use these boxes because they do have a function in terms of keeping the dice in the reserve away from everything that's in play, although we've only had instances of players rolling dice and their dice mingling, not really getting in the reserve, just because we keep all those reserve dice off to the side. They do have a function and a purpose, and they play up the blocky nature of the game, but I would find using them incredibly fussy, just to put all the dice away separately in each one and then to take them out again. It's much easier for me just to shove everything in the well and then dump it out when it's time to play. I want to get going in the game and not worry about all the mishmash of handling different things. And the mishmash comes up a bit when you are looking at the details of the rules, where the rules don't always answer every question that you might have. It's not initially clear how it says when you use the blue power to move into a water space, but what about continuing to move through a water space? We found ourselves having to just say like, well, this makes sense. We'll just do this. And we'll just roll with it. And that's fine because we're not in a competitive Cubitos tournament where we have to worry about all playing by the same rules, as long as together, collectively, we are all playing by the same rules. There's a lot of details to work out along those lines, and the rulebook could have been more comprehensive. It does have a nice glossary in the back to provide more detail for each card and how it's working. But of course, when you're putting together 8 different cards from 56 possibilities across 4 player boards, you're still going to probably have questions. It's hard to cover everything without lots of playtesting and taking notes where you're having people play without teaching them and seeing what questions they have. It would take a lot of detail to cover all that. I definitely approve of Alderac embracing this block theme, despite me dismissing the storage blocks, just because it gives the game a fun look. All the cards have interesting names that play up either the cubes or the particular type of creature or object that is in the game, in the case of the cheese. It's just fun to have those sort of elements being played up. I was looking for references to Uncle Scrooge and Plain Awful. Did not see those. I did not see a reference to Ian Dury either. Missed opportunities. Maybe in an expansion. We'll put on those little extra details there. Or I've just missed them, looking over everything that's in the game so far. As I mentioned, I played 6 times, and I've enjoyed the puzzle nature of the game where you're trying to figure things out and have stuff work out the right way and decide when to push your luck and play all these things. There's tons of randomness in terms of what's going on, and you trying to manage and corral that randomness and push it all in the right direction in order to profit from it. But I wish there was more going on where I care about what other people are doing outside the last 1/5 of the game when we're getting near the finish line, and we care now about turn order. Otherwise, I'm pretty much head down in my own area, worrying about what I can do with my stuff, and what other people are doing, not paying attention. I mean, maybe that's why I'm losing. Maybe I should be paying more attention to other people and trying to mimic what they're doing. But that seems weird as well, because if you're already doing something successful and I'm behind you and I start doing the same thing, it seems like I'm probably not going to catch up by doing the same thing. It's just, I lost out. I made the wrong choices initially, and I have to live with that and move on and then hopefully do better next time based on what I've learned. Although, again, you're playing with different card combinations all the time, so maybe I'll never learn anything that will carry over to future games. It's hard to tell. But now you get a sense of what's going on in Cubitos, so you'll know what to expect when you see this cheese on the game cover.